Okay, now if you can, I want you to actually physically move your chair in some way, or if you're standing or whatever, move to just a slightly different location. And now you're going to write or say whatever you did previously. You're going to now take on the point of view of, in my situation, the employee who is being late, who's had a problem with being late, and you're going to now write from their point of view. What would they say back to you after you just said everything that you said to them? And I'll give you another minute to write from the other person's point of view. What would they say back? And go. And about 10 more seconds. So getting the last words out from this point of view. Okay, then final point of view in the triangle that goes with the drama triangle. This is your own kind of internal drama triangle. You are now going to be a third point of view that heard what you initially said, your point of view, heard what the other point of view was said back. And now for 1 minute, you're going to write from this point of view that is not on either side, but whatever you want to say to both people involved or both parties involved in this conflict. And you have 1 more minute and then we'll be done with this. So this is the third point of view, taking in both other points of view in this conflict and letting them know what you see based on your seat from outside the conflict. Go. 1 minute. And about 10 more seconds. Wrap up that last thought. And done. So how was that? Did that shift things for you, change things for you? I had to include it today because when I started going through the drama triangle, I remember we did this exercise in class, and at the time, I was in a relationship that was really rough. It was actually a romantic relationship, and at the time we were having a disagreement, and I gave all my points of view, then I took their points of view on, and I gave them back to me. And then in that third chair where I saw the whole thing going on, I was just like, I had this clarity of like, wow, like there's not a lot of love here, and maybe this relationship just doesn't need to go on. And that was kind of, for me, I couldn't believe how powerful that perspective shift was for me to actually get some awareness and perspective about what was going on for me. But also that was kind of the beginning of the end, and it changed the dynamic because I wasn't really fighting in the same way anymore. I was now kind of like working towards a peaceful exit. After I did this exercise, it just gave me that much clarity, you know. Um, so if there are any comments that I'm missing, Kirsten, you let me know, because with my screen being shared, etc., if anybody wants to chime in about this or share their experience of doing this exercise, now is a great time for that. Otherwise, I will move on.
We don't have any comments in the chat, but I do want to say that I think that it's a great perspective shift, like you said, especially when it gives you empathy, right? When you can put yourself in the role of the other person or from an outsider looking in, it helps that empathy come in, and maybe, at least for me, like I can calm down a little bit, understand where that person is coming from, and maybe see my own crazy, right? Of maybe I'm overreacting a little bit, or I'm not being as empathetic as I should. So I appreciate the triangle a lot.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirsten. That's super good. I appreciate that perspective. And that's how it's felt for me too. You know, it helps me find that empathy. And thank you for bringing that word in. So another thing that can be helpful with drama triangles are just boundaries, right? Boundaries can be so helpful with conflict. Um, and I'll get into my own examples from my own life as we do this, but just be asking yourself right now, what are boundaries? What are they for? And who do we set boundaries with? And I'm going to definitely answer these questions. So boundaries are to protect yourself and others. Like they're about safety, feeling safe, feeling comfortable. And boundaries can be set with strangers, family and friends, and yourself. There might be boundaries that I need to have, you know, as a person who identifies as a person in recovery. You know, there's definitely some new boundaries that I've needed to have in the last 10 years of my life that I wasn't very worried about prior to my recovery. So, boundaries to help me feel safe with my own recovery are very important, and those boundaries with myself. So I love this line. When I set and uphold boundaries with myself and others, I increase my self-worth because I can trust myself to protect myself. So that's awesome. And then the other thing I'll say about boundaries is the easiest guideline, you know, how do I know, where do I want to set a boundary? When should a boundary be set? Who should I set them with? I think you always kind of feel it inside. And Brene Brown says, what's okay and what's not okay. And letting people know, you know, this is okay with me, this isn't okay. And when I haven't communicated something, which I still try to do, is I people pleaser, you know, I've gotten so much better with my own communication. There's still room to grow though. And I will hesitate to let people know, like, oh, that makes me feel icky. Like I need a boundary here, right? So when I can communicate that, then I let them know what's okay, what's not okay, and I feel more comfortable, I feel more safe, and the relationship just feels better to me. Another thing that I run into with conflict a lot of times is content versus intent, right? So a lot of times an argument can go on and on and on. We're stuck in content, right? And content would be, it feels like a court of law. Like, here's all the reasons you're wrong. Here's all the reasons you're wrong. You know, and when somebody wins an argument and there's a winner and a loser, the relationship really loses if we don't find some way to kind of come together on things, hear the other person's point of view, seek to understand what their side of it really is about, is going to be underneath the content, right? And if we're intelligent, if we're good at arguing, those kinds of things, or if we're really into or activated by our side of the argument, it can be hard to let that in, right? And we want to just like kind of disqualify it, especially if the person that we're arguing with is somebody that we care about. Because when they're upset and we care about them, we just want that to stop. That's actually painful for us to be around or witness or listen to, right? So it's a lot it's a lot easier for me to just kind of like explain your feelings away, or in a court of law, like build a case for why you shouldn't feel this way. Like, there's no reason you should be sad. Like, I walked the dog. Like, you can't be sad. It's like all that's doing is invalidating or taking away from them what their experience is, right? And we can't be wrong about our experience, right? Somebody needs to care about my feelings, right? Or there might need to be a different boundary in place for what's going on in this whole relationship, right? So content versus intent, and understanding how that kind of works and plays on us. It's human nature to not want something to be our fault, or to kind of explain it away. But that gets away from listening, hearing somebody's concerns, and actually taking a look at them to see if there's something that I can improve upon, right? Am I open to feedback? Am I willing to grow, or am I defensive, shutting everything down, and nobody has a valid point, right? I've been in places and times in my life where I was that kind of like the soldier in the big iron suit, from the medieval times. Nothing can get through, and I'm fine, and just leave me alone, and you're wrong, and we shouldn't have conflict, and those kinds of things. But I'm not growing, I'm not changing, I'm not letting other people feel heard, and that's not really it's not a good way to be a leader or a manager or anything like that. So just be wary if you feel like you're in a place of, I'm proving all my points and you're proving all your points. You're probably just in content, Bill, and there's something more important underneath that maybe both sides are not listening to, and we're at war, and so it just takes one person to kind of back down, hear what the other person's saying, and try to work towards that resolution. So hopefully that's helpful. The four horsemen and their antidotes. These are behaviors that can escalate conflict and actually really do damage in a relationship. And they come from, like I said, my couples work. But they're really great because the Gottmans, they're actually a couple themselves, and they work with couples, and they identified these four horsemen, and they actually did a bunch of studies and research, and depending on which horsemen are present, and if all four of them are, they can predict really with quite a bit of accuracy about how long the relationship's going to last, and what, like, these are really detrimental things that are really harmful and hurtful in a relationship. And we probably learned them from our families of origin. I am guilty of doing all of the following four horsemen in different times of my life, different relationships that I've done. And I'm also going to list through, what do we do if we notice this particular four horsemen, one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse is showing up? Here's an antidote to help you with that. So the first one is criticism. So this is somebody that's dealing with problems through harsh blaming, hurtful expressions of judgment or disapproval. The focus is on perceived personal flaws rather than changeable behaviors. And criticism is often met with defensiveness. So it's name calling, right? It's not very nice. This kitchen is a mess. This office is the worst. You're such a slob, right? So a different way to deal with, if you notice that criticism is happening, and that horseman is present, you can go with gentle startup, which is dealing with problems in a calm and gentle way, and focusing on the problem, not any shortcomings with the person or judgments about the person themselves. Save the discussion for an appropriate time when you feel like you can have a productive discussion. Use warm body language and tone of voice, and use I statements. So I feel frustrated when the dishes are dirty or are left in the sink. Could you please do the dishes tonight? I feel I'm having an issue with this. This is hard for me, right? And that doesn't so much make it about you, which when I'm criticizing you and I come off with just here's all the things that are wrong, rather than my experience and how I feel about the dishes, right? Then it's going to be less likely to bring about defensiveness or start an argument where we're not being fair potentially. So defensiveness is another one of the four horsemen. So this is deflecting responsibility for your own mistakes and behaviors or refusing to accept feedback. So making excuses for your behavior, shifting blame. It isn't my fault. I yelled. You were late, not me, right? So I'm blameless here. I'm totally defensive. And that's not really going to be helpful as far as a person to communicate with if they're in a defensive place, right? And sometimes, depending on what's going on for us emotionally, how activated we are, that might be the best we can do is just defensive. And if I'm trying to approach somebody that's defensive, I might want to take that into account and give them some time, right? And there might be a better time for the conversation to take place. So the antidote to being defensive is owning up to your behavior without blaming others. So just I can take accountability for that. I can see how I participated in us getting to this point. Avoid taking feedback personally. Seeing feedback as something that can help you grow, something that you can learn from. Using feedback as an opportunity to improve, and then actually showing remorse, and being honestly sorry and really apologizing, after you've been defensiveness, taking accountability for that and saying, I shouldn't have raised my voice. I'm sorry. That's wanting to move forward and kind of breaking down that pattern. Contempt. It's such a good picture of Simon Cowell, because sometimes he's, it's a karaoke performance or whatever. He's not happy about it. But contempt is kind of like you bring that to the party. You're showing anger, disgust, hostility, using put downs or insults, acting superior, using a mocking or sarcastic tone. And you're just not being nice. There's a lot of contempt there. So to counteract contempt and have an antidote for that, foster healthy relationships by regularly showing each other respect and appreciation. It's okay to recognize another person's strengths and give compliments when you can. That is working away from contempt. The fourth and final horseman of the four horsemen of the apocalypse is stonewalling. Emotionally withdrawing, shutting down, or going silent during important discussions. Often a response to feeling overwhelmed, used to avoid difficult discussions or problems. Underlying problems go unresolved when we're doing stonewalling. So this was probably, I said previously that I'm in recovery now. Stonewalling was probably my number one go-to, and it was actually a partner at the time. It was their go-to as well. So I remember actually being on drives where nobody talked for 4 hours, where it was like, there's definitely a disagreement that happened. There's definitely something we should talk about, but I'm not open to it, and I'm not open to it. And we're just going to both kind of be right on our sides of this conflict and sit in my rightness, and I'm going to sit in my rightness, and I'm not open to your wrongness. And it's just total shutdown. There might as well be a wall in between us in that car. We're right next to each other, but there's no way any communication is going to get through. So when you get into a stonewalling place, and I think this too, the more work that I do with trauma, this is a real trauma response, right? This is like freeze. So you can use self-soothing relaxation techniques to calm down and stay present. Agree to pause the conversation briefly, and anything that you do that helps you ground or become more regulated. Progressive muscle relaxation, breathing techniques, hot or cold shower, music, anything that helps you just kind of be like, okay, I'm in a new moment now, and I can kind of break through that freeze or break down that wall that's not letting us communicate. So those are the four horsemen of the apocalypse from the Gottmans. And now I'm going to move into the fair fighting rules, which are just awesome things to keep in mind. And I'm going to be happy to share um, all these slides with everybody who's here today. If you're interested, I can definitely make sure that you guys get copies of this in case you want to come back to it. So here are the fair fighting rules, and I think they're just so helpful. So before you begin some sort of argument, ask yourself why you feel upset. Like having clarity, what is the thing that I want to get resolved, or what do I need to communicate? So are you angry because somebody didn't make more coffee, or are you angry because you feel like you're doing an uneven share of the work? And this is just one more piece of evidence. So it's taking time to think about your own feelings before starting into a feedback session or a time of conflict where we're going to try to resolve an issue that you don't see eye to eye on. Discuss one topic at a time. Don't let your lateness is affecting the productivity of the whole team turn into you always get to pick the catering company, right? Like that can quickly happen. I don't know what your fights look like, but it's really easy. It's like, would you please, not let my car come home with the empty light on or something like that. It's like, well, you never mow the lawn. It's like, then we just start packing on all these different topics. And if I was really upset about the lawn, or I was really upset about whatever, I need to be the person to start that conversation all on its own. I don't want to be walking around with like my arsenal ready to go, so that if you dare bring anything up, I've got 30 things I can throw back. Like that's not fair, right? It's fair to actually let you know if I have these 30 things in a one by one fashion. No degrading language. So discuss the issue, not the person. This is similar to one of the antidotes in the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Next one would be express your feelings with words. So again, another kind of repetition here from the Gottmans. Structure your sentences as I statements. I feel this emotion when this happens, to express, how you feel while taking responsibility for your emotions. So just in case, though, I does not give you a license to using I statements, doesn't mean that you don't have to respect and use all the rest of the fair fighting rules. Take turns speaking. This can be really hard, right? But actually giving your full attention while the other person speaks. Avoid making corrections or thinking about what you want to say. Like that's so hard, where I've got this really good point and I'm gonna make it, and all I'm doing, I've stopped listening 10 minutes ago because I'm just holding on to that point that I'm going to make, and I'm not going to forget it, and I'm not, and that can keep things stuck. So your only job when it's not your turn to speak, if you actually take turns speaking, is to understand the other person's point of view, even if you disagree. If you find it difficult not to interrupt, you can try setting a timer even to allow each other to take turns and for the other person to speak without interruption. No stonewalling. Recognize that from the four horsemen. The easiest way to respond to an argument is to retreat into your shell and refuse to speak. This is called stonewalling. You might feel better temporarily, but the original issue will remain unresolved and your partner will feel more and more upset. So if you absolutely can't go on, tell them that you need to take a time out and agree that you will come back to the discussion later, right? So sometimes we can get in a pattern of, I stonewalled long enough and we never had to talk about it again, right? And so what do I learn is that if I stonewall, then maybe I can avoid conflict altogether. No yelling. Yelling doesn't help anyone see your point of view. Instead, it sends the message that only your words matter. Even if yelling intimidates others into giving up, the underlying problem, similar to the stonewalling, it just grows and gets worse. So if you can't do it without yelling, take a time out, because things are just too heated. And in Japanese culture, the first person who raises their voice loses the argument. So something to think about. Attempt to come to a compromise. There isn't always a perfect answer to an argument. Life is just too messy for that. But you can do your best and notice if you're in a place where you're willing to compromise. Are you wanting resolution, right? So both sides can give and take some in any situation. And if you can't come to a compromise, simply taking the time to understand what they're really talking about, really understanding what their issues are, can help you soothe negative feelings. And that perspective switching exercise that we did, right? We're going to start to have some empathy if we really hear what they're saying rather than just waiting for our turn to talk. It's going to shift it, and hopefully help us find some more resolution.
So
So
I have a question for you.
yeah.
So how do you balance when you need the boundaries, right? So for example, if you're in a couple situation or a close relationship situation where one of you can say some very not nice things when they haven't been given the time to think about their words, but maybe the other person doesn't do well when someone leaves the room or when they set that boundary of I need time and space. How do you have that conversation of, hey, we both deal with frustrating, conflict in different ways in order for us to come together and have a reasonable conversation. I need this to happen, but the other person wants something else to happen. How do you have that conversation, if that makes sense?
Totally. I think what you just said is a really great intro into it, right? And you do it when it's not in the moment, right? You do it like, hey, last night, this was happening. I've noticed this pattern's coming up, right? And something that I think is really helpful for couples to understand is like the louder we're getting, the more scared we are, right? Our lives are like really intertwined, and like it gets scary. It's actually fear is present, and it seems like, wait a minute, maybe this isn't going to work out. And, what does that mean? Then the anxiety kicks in about how's that actually going to happen? But the louder we're getting, the more fearful we are. And a lot of times, if one partner really is conflict avoidant, or if it's feeling too hot and they need to like get out and have some time before it's going to be a productive conversation, and that's really hard for the other partner, then trust can be built around, okay, but we know that we're coming back to this at another time, right? It's not going to be that if you get out of this room right now, that means this was my only chance to have this conversation, right? And sometimes, depending on the couple, depending on the situation, like sometimes writing it on a whiteboard, like this, we're coming back to this, let me know when, and there's a combined kind of cooperation or trust around that, right? Like right now, something about this isn't productive for either side. That doesn't mean that we're never coming back to this. And you leaving doesn't mean that we're never coming back to this, So I can trust that I'm still going to be heard. And I can also trust that right now you're not able to hear me. Does that make sense, or is that helpful at all?
No, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the real key is to talk about it when we're not seeing red, right? It's like 3 days ago we did that thing again, and I want to find a way for us to work better with that. I want to find ways for us to talk about that, or put boundaries in place so we can both feel comfortable and doesn't escalate like that, because I know I don't feel good about how I showed up. And here's what's really going on for me when that happens, right? And that can really shift it. And these are things, which we've just learned. We've been doing them. Maybe somebody did them to us. They're, we all need to like improve on this stuff. And so if we can, open it up in a way that anything's up for discussion, how you show up in fights is up for discussion. And it's not about me bringing you down. It's about us getting better at disagreeing so that there's less damage each time so that we can get back to being the great team that we are.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So any other questions about communication or anything before we move into our building community stuff? Thank you for the question, Kirsten. I really appreciate it. All right. I found this stuff. I just felt like it was really good. It was actually in Forbes magazine. And I was doing, different research. I looked into different places and coaching companies and a lot of different things. But I just felt like for our venue here, these were just really probably the most applicable and best set of 10 that I found. So I'm going to go through them, give a couple thoughts on them, and also share something that I've noticed afterwards. So engaging in activities outside of work, right? And same for if we're talking about couples, if we can find ways to engage in activities outside of maybe the parenting structure or outside of paying the mortgage or whatever, if we can kind of get outside of our normal patterns and show up in different ways, then that could be really helpful to create bonds that carry over from that outside activity and come back into the workspace. Sharing opinions without judgment, right? I can learn in an environment, in a meeting, whatever. It's really easy to kind of shut down open communication, shut down opinions. It just takes one person to be judging about it or make it feel not safe to do that, or any sort of insults around it or any kind of judgment around it can really shut things down, and that isolates everybody. I'm not part of the group, right? There's like one person in charge and everybody else is like silent followers, and that's not a community, right? That's like a dictatorship. Ask questions and share praise. So something that we do at Vest, there's always in our meetings, there's always time for people to ask questions, bring things up that we want to work on. And then there's also like a requirement at the beginning of meetings to like praise someone on the team that we feel like has done some good work recently. A lot of times I don't have to look any further than like my care center team. We had something come in that was hard for us to handle, or maybe we found someone, a resource that they really have been looking for and haven't been able to find for even up to like a year or 2 years. But then they finally contacted the care center and we handled it in a weekend, and they're like, yay, that's amazing. So sharing praise can just show that like as a leader, as a team, we focus on the positive things, and making that a requirement in meetings can be really helpful. Enjoying a meal together, and that goes right with hosting a lunch and learn session. So like this meeting right here, this can give you guys something to talk about after the meeting, where you can talk about what you thought was interesting, what you thought was not helpful, whatever it is. It's kind of outside of the work environment, but it's also a lunch and learn. It's giving us other things to discuss that we can feel part of a community around. But sharing a meal, just eating together, again, that's kind of like it feels outside of work, and it's a necessary thing that we need to do, and as humans, right? And so we're doing human things together rather than focusing on all these tasks and things like that. Asking for feedback as a leader, as a member of a team, asking for feedback from your leader, however you can do that, if you can normalize that and show that, like, hey, I can take feedback, it's okay. I'm here, I want to grow, I want to improve today. Please let me know if there's anything that I can do. Being open and asking for feedback can go a long way. Um, Value other people's opinions and ideas, right? That can go into praise. But that starts to feel really safe, right? If, like, I expressed an opinion, it wasn't judged, but it was actually valued. It was like, huh, I never thought about it that way. Let's think about ways that we can implement that more. Provide proper resources and assistance. And my apologies, I didn't take that text off this slide, so it's kind of hard to read there, but don't mind photo or graph here. But the proper resources and assistance, right? You guys definitely have that, I know, through VEST and for mental health. If there's another resource or something that your team needs and they're expressing that, like, we're going to this thing and we don't have business cards, or whatever, that can be uncomfortable. And so providing those resources and hearing out what sort of assistance is needed or where those blind spots might be for you or your team can be really helpful. Involving team members in decision making, like, hey, we've got this big thing coming up in 6 months, we're trying to reimagine how the shifts are going to work. And we want to just open it up and see who has any kind of suggestions. We're going to, change it over, and we want to explore, what our hybrid status is going to be, if there's going to be requirements to that. So we're just opening up the discussion, and we want to see what you guys would like, and we want to keep you on as because we value what you do here. So that can go a long way. And then creating a charitable shared experience. A lot of companies can find a lot of community in that, where, I'm thinking of like Sub for Santa, or we do a 5K for this thing, or, some sort of shared purpose that is towards a charity that's agreed upon. It's either voted upon or whatever. And then you find a way to, as a company, as a team, to have that common goal and give back. That can really help with community, help building community in a work setting. So my own experience, I don't know if you've ever done any of these, but the Myers-Briggs personality test, color code personality test, and even Enneagram. Again, this comes from different companies that I worked with, either in residential treatment or when we were trying to create community in residential treatment. If you take any one of these tests with a group of people and then explore your results together and get a better understanding of, like, what the different types of people are, what's kind of just their default setting, that kind of perspective can really, and how necessary all the different types are, right? Like, it can just be such a paradigm shift and really kind of expand your awareness of who's on your team and what's valuable about the way they really want to get things done on time versus, the ideas people. And, like, there's just really different types of people, and we need all the different types of people, and understanding them and understanding the results of them through any one of these personality tests I've seen create community time and time again in different groups that I've done. So that could be something you might want to explore if you'd like. As always, you guys know about our app. Your sign-in code is SL County. You can share that with your loved ones. You can reach into the care center. There's lots of different new updated videos under the courses tab down here. There's all kinds of, like, different things that you might be interested in. There's communication stuff in the app, videos from our team that we've created, and some of the other trainings that we have built. And then upcoming, we have these Webinars, the next one is a week from tomorrow is transition, finding your way back to regulation. And then they're the last Wednesday of every month at noon. So there's the other topics. They can be really cool. They're always open discussion. There's always a clinician there from our team. And then sometimes there's, another guest, or there's just different topics every time. And then my email's right there, joel@vesteap.com. If there's anything that you want to follow up with individually about this, or if there's anything I can do to help you with getting on the app, or you want to start some sort of a care center interaction, or want me to reach out to you, or just anything at all, my door is open through my email, and you can just email me directly. So that is all I have for today, and I want to thank you guys all for being here.
No, thank you, Joel. We super appreciate it. We did have one question that someone threw in the chat about communication. It was asked, what is the rule about very old, meaning years, issues? Can we still bring up the issues and try to work through it, or is there a timeline end?
It only has to work for you, right? It only has to work for you and the people involved, right? So there aren't any hard and fast rules around the timeline of things. I will say, if there's something that really feels like there needs to be an apology, or some sort of damage has been done, that keeps coming up, it's hard for you to put down, I think it's worth doing it. If you haven't been able to do it on your own, it might be beneficial to explore that with a professional mediator of some kind of your choosing, either through your faith or through counseling or therapy, or those kinds of things. So there's not like a rule, but it does need to be okay with everybody in the relationship that we're going back to it. And as far as it goes, like, once the repair or the attempt at the repair, if you're able to ask for, like, hey, I need this apology, I would really appreciate it. And then you get that, or they do their best to give that, it's helpful to have an intention to move forward, because the past is set in stone. Like, we can't really go back. And if we're choosing to stay with them and be with them, then why would we want to choose something that's also dividing? If we can get an apology where we need it, and then choose to try to connect in different ways, or give this moment a chance by letting the past be the past, I think is a healthy way to go about it as best you can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was the only question we had in the chat. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate everything that you shared with us. Once again, if you're still on here and you would like to be able to receive points for today's workshop, make sure you go into Well Steps and mark that off. And then, of course, if you have any questions, you can reach out to Vest directly, or you're welcome to reach out to one of us at Healthy Lifestyles. We're here to help as well. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.